A lot of times the best entrepreneurs are kind of not very good employees.
Why do you think that is?
Because you have to be a bit of a psychopath. If you don't like where you are, one, what's your fuel? Two, what's that fuel going to be on a path to serve? And then the third was...
Oh, that's good. Say that again.
Codie Sanchez climbed the ranks in corporate finance only to break out in pursuit of entrepreneurship. She started with no money, no connections, and no safety net. But through grit and determination, she learned that escaping wage dependency isn't just about becoming your own boss.
I think we actually have an existential threat on our hands. We are becoming a nation of people who want titles that sound cool as opposed to impact that is real.
That'll preach, Codie.
We have a recession the likes of which will make 2008 look cute because we don't realize.
Codie, I love to coach people who are trying to figure out, should I stay, should I go? I've had that unique opportunity here. And they're effectively trying to figure out, all right, is it my time to move on? And I was listening to several conversations that you've done. Mm-hmm. And I love your story. Mm-hmm. Was there a push and a pull? For instance, I think that when people feel like they're ready to go, they're feeling a pull. Mm-hmm. The heart, the soul is being pulled to something. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I think the best time to leave is when there's a push and a pull. Do you agree, disagree with that? And then how does that play into your story?
Well, my story was I had to get kicked out of the building, basically. So I had less push or pull and more of, I would have stayed forever. I would have been an employee for other people, doing well, but building somebody's empire for, I think, all of my career. I rather liked my gig. I liked most of my gigs, actually. I just got to a certain point where I thought there was a better way to do it. I wasn't skilled enough to get them to listen or to manipulate that conversation. And so they thought their way was better than my way. And so, I remember vividly the biggest kick I got out was I was walking along the beach with one of my CEOs at the time, and I was running a Latin American division, and I thought that the future of investing and getting deals and getting investors was online. I thought it was newsletters. I thought it was emails. I didn't think it would be steak dinners in mahogany wooded ballrooms anymore. And so he disagreed. And so after me kind of bothering him he finally said, listen, if you want to row left, but we're going right, you got to get your own boat. And you can't do it on mine. And it's totally fair. He was right. And so I eventually decided that. Like a few months later, I was like, all right, I'm going to go and do it by myself. But they had to basically tell me that, I couldn't do it my way. And so I think maybe there's a lot of people today in entrepreneurship that think you got to burn the bridges and you can sleep on the couch and, one way or no way, focus on the one thing. And I don't think that's actually true for most of us. I think there's nothing wrong with a little monkey bar from one thing to the next as we're figuring it out and making sure we don't fall down. And that's okay. And so you're right. There's probably some push, some pull, and at the right moment, you can go from one bar to the other. But I don't think that you should feel bad for holding on to your current thing for a minute.
I agree.
And then waiting a little bit before you grab the other one. Now, my only caveat is that, karma's a real you-know-what. And so make sure that you are the employee that you want to have in the future. Otherwise, you will get the employee that you were in the past. And so I am careful to make sure that I never underperformed. I just spent every other waking minute doing something else.
Well, that's what I want to go into. So I heard you share that. So you've got this moment where he goes, look, if you're going to go left, I'm going right. Find your own boat. I love that, by the way. And now you're confronted. Mm-hmm. Now you've got a moment. You don't have to leave.
Yeah.
But it was probably the beginning of the end regardless of how long it took. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, what was the transition like for you mentally and then actually professionally? Yeah. What did that actually look like, the unmooring of your boat, if you will?
Anger. I mean, I think building because you're angry is an underrated hack.
So you were really angry when he said,
mad.
Not doing it your way.
Yeah, I was like, you're wrong. I'm going to prove you right and watch me. And maybe that's not the healthiest of emotions, but it worked for me. I was really mad. I was like, I built this huge business for you. We're $1 billion in assets under management. You're yet letting these yahoos do it in a way that I don't think is ethically or morally right. And we should do it this way instead. Why can't you see that? And so I was just mad. And also a little too immature to realize like that is the moment where the universe is telling you, go build your own thing. And he was doing me a huge favor, giant gift. But at the time I was just just a little pissed. And so I think that's okay too. Now do it the right way. I didn't like flame it on the way out, but I did go and build the next thing because I was mad. And to this day, I keep it in some of my speeches, but I have I think you should keep fuel.
I do too.
And so I took a screenshot of one of the managers at the company, and he had sent me an email one night, and I think he'd had a little, and so he sent me an email, and the email said, "I hope you gained more followers today because you have dumbed down the firm."
Ooh, that's nasty.
Yeah, I didn't like it. And so I did the adult thing, which is I screenshot it and I put it up in front of thousands of people every week. But I took his name off, like kind of. It's Dan,
Right.
Anyway, but the reason I keep that email is just as a reminder that like it's okay if people doubt you, and you can use that as fuel. You can become the victor, the victim. And so I was mad, but that led to me building the next thing.
What was that timeline like from you actually leaving the firm? Because this is something you said a minute ago that I think is so wise, and I don't want people who are watching or listening to this to miss this. You're not for a Geronimo jump off of a cliff.
Yeah, no.
What was that actual timeline and steps that you took?
Yeah, well, I had for years done the first you learn as much as possible, then you earn, then you increase your earnings, and then you invest. And so I think there are 4 steps to making money, and that's typically how it goes. And so for years, I had taken all the learnings, put it to earnings, taken all the earnings, and put it into investing as much as I could. So I had a little cushion because I lived way cheaper than I needed to for a long time. And basically, I just had this fund where at any given point, somebody made me really, I was like, I don't like how you're doing it. Okay, well, I got another option, right? And I think that's real healthy for people to have. Some people call it an emergency fund, but it doesn't have to be an emergency. In fact, it could just be in business because it can go this way. Sometimes it could be an ethical fund. I was like, I don't like the way you do business. I'm not sacrificing my beliefs for your dollars. And so, so I had that built up. And yet I was still too scared. So let's see, I had started investing in things on the side when I was at that firm. And I think it was probably 3 months after I had that conversation when I finally decided to leave. And I set up my number 2 to run the business for them. And so she's become very successful doing that. They keep rocking and rolling. But I needed about 90 days to figure out what the next step was going to be. And so I think, if you don't like where you are, 1, what's your fuel? What's a why so big you can get over anyhow? 2, what's that fuel going to be on a path to serve? And so where do you want to go? Because it's real hard to get there if you don't know where you're going. And then the third was, well, I got my fuel. I know where I'm going, but what do I think is going to be the easiest way to get there? What's my 90-day plan where every single day, even when I feel a little lost, I know I can take a step or 2? And so I like to kind of lay it out a bit before I make the full jump, because then at least I know the tide's up, the water's high, and maybe it's a little warm.
What happened to you emotionally on the other side of anger after you actually jumped, but you jumped into something that was nice, you figured it out, you laid it out for us just now. I'm curious, the emotional difference, if you can remember what that was like to go from anger to, okay, I'm now standing on my own 2 feet. What were you feeling at that point?
Well, if I'm super honest, I didn't bet on myself enough that second go-round to go do it all the way.
Okay.
So I think maybe like a lot of people do, you make some forward momentum, but you hold yourself back a little bit. So I went and I partnered with somebody else on the next fund. I didn't go and do it by myself. I still thought I needed somebody else to do it. I wasn't good enough by myself. I think you get in a cycle sometimes where you're like, man, if I'm the only one in charge, then what happens if it doesn't work out? That's me, right? So I actually went to another company at that time and I partnered. So I had way more skin in the game. I had a lot of money in that business and I partnered with a couple other people. But I think by that point, I was so unemployable. I think like a lot of times the best entrepreneurs are kind of not very good employees.
Why do you think that is?
Because you have to be a bit of a psychopath to do this game called entrepreneurship.
It's scary.
Yeah, not in like the total sense, but you have to be willing to tolerate a lot of pain and have really strong opinions about where you're going to go because you have to get a bunch of other people to buy into it, right? You can't really do it by yourself. And so at that point, again, I had a couple partners that just wanted to do it more traditionally. And I was really set on this idea of like the internet is the way for investing in the future. And I think, by the way, Dan, I'm right. But at that time, I didn't know that. And so it took me another almost kick before I finally had, as my father would say, the cojones to go out and do it by myself. And at that point, the first feeling was like crippling anxiety and uncertainty. It wasn't like sunshine and rainbows either.
Yeah. I
was
love
like,
that you say that. It reminds me, I interviewed Jim Collins years ago from Good to Great fame.
Yeah, great
And he
book.
said this, and I'm going to paraphrase, he said, we aren't risk averse.
Yeah.
Or ambiguity averse. What a statement. Some real depth in that. And that also makes me think of some data that I love to talk about. Bureau of Labor Statistics 2023, 70% of Americans said they want to be self-employed, but only 6% are.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to Jim Collins. I think he's right.
Yeah.
If we're ambiguity averse, so that unknown, fancy word, we don't know,
Yeah.
right? We're scared of the unknown. What do entrepreneurs need to know from your experience? If you said, okay, if you know this, this will help you overcome that fear of the unknown.
It's a great question. I think you have to get in rooms where other people's Tuesday is your dream day. You got to get
that's
around.
Good.
You know?
Say that again.
You got to get in rooms where other people's Tuesday is your dream day.
Yes.
And I think, if you think about it, if you really dumb it down, it's like, let me tell you how to not be fat. Only hang out with CrossFitters that don't eat gluten or dairy, that work out every day and would never go drink.
So true.
If you are only hanging out with them all the time, are you going to have a harder time being fat? Yeah, the answer is yes. Why? Because you're just around a bunch of other people that do the thing that you wish that you could do. And it's much easier to do the thing that you wish you could do when it's, proximity is power. So when it's close around you. And so I think with entrepreneurship, what I realized is like you want to get around a bunch of other people that are already entrepreneurs, that are already having some level of success. Not too high, actually, because then they're not relatable to you, and it's much harder to forget what started the climb when you're all the way at the top. You want to be like a couple steps ahead. And then you want to be able to be in the next couple steps ahead, because I think the job of CEO is really you're in a car, and your job is to extend the headlights as much as possible and to figure out if the GPS is right or wrong. And you can go faster and you can go in the right direction when both of those things are right, because every company has both magnitude and vector, right? They have speed and they have direction. And it's physics of a company. And so if you can get the speed to go faster, but you're going in the wrong direction, well, that's not going to work out. If you can get the direction right and you can increase the speed, then you're going to beat the competition. And so I want to get in a room where other people have already seen the mistakes that I'm going to make. At some point in your career, the things that you think are crippling you, the things that you think you won't survive, the moment that you think the business will fail, you will laugh at in a few years from now.
So true.
And at this point, you can't see that. And if you were with somebody who was a few turns ahead of you on the road, they would be able to tell you, the storm's over, it's all downhill from here, there's a gas station at the end of the road, you're totally going to be fine. But if you're by yourself, you'll talk yourself into a series of catastrophes that you will probably miss.
That's so good. I wrote a book called The Proximity Principle.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Which simply says...
I wasn't sucking up to either.
No, I know you weren't, but I want to call it out because it's simple. In order to do what you want to do, we're talking entrepreneurship, be around entrepreneurs, be in places where entrepreneurship is happening. I love what you said about their Tuesday is your dream day. I mean, that is so good, because what happens is the impossibility begins to kind of float away from your mind when you're seeing it happen all the time.
Yeah.
There's something about that. And I love that you bring that up.
You also see that we're all not that smart. Too.
Well,
so
that's
you
the
hang
issue.
out with a few, there are
Well, they
few.
start telling you what they did wrong, and you start going,
Yeah.
their stuff stinks.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I think that's an important part about the internet too, is remembering that even when we try to show our non-highlights, it still does, it's not as visceral. So just remember that everybody's just figuring out, nobody has any idea what they're doing anyway.
So much rolling off of you right now. Okay, so I want to go to that for a second while you just said it. I find you to be very authentic on Instagram, and I don't know if I believe that about a lot of people.
Smart.
That's why I don't do a lot of personal stuff on there, because I feel like I don't want to come across that way. Yeah. But it seems that you're very no nonsense and I think that's authentic to you. Is that true?
Yeah.
How would you describe your personality?
Well, the team would say that I come off on the internet as more serious, probably. And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm thinking about something, I don't smile. It's like I'm right
I do
here.
the same
and so
thing.
I'm,
The brow furrows and all
this
that.
means I'm actually really thinking about it. So I'm probably a lot goofier in person. They actually have to have a sign in my office that says smile B word on it because I'm never smiling. So when I'm filming, I'm always kind of seriously thinking about what I'm trying to talk about, and so I have to smile while I'm doing it. But in life, I think nobody gets out alive, and we're not curing brain cancer here, and so we should probably take it kind of light. As I really like the idea of strong opinions loosely held, of this idea of, is anybody going to die today? Probably not. So let's keep moving forward. And we should have fun because we're playing a game. The game is business. The game we have chosen to play is the game of business. But you continue to play the game because you like it. Even if you lose, you are sort of addicted to it. It's sort of like if you were a professional athlete, a professional pickleball player, right?
Oh, don't tease me. That would be my fantasy right now.
You probably are, because
No.
let's talk about pickleball's players are not. This is not athlete, right?
Well,
You
I got to
think
tell you, I'm
pickleballers
trying
are
not to be
athletes?
offended right now, but yeah, no, it absolutely,
wanted to stir
the
the pot.
eye-hand coordination alone is extremely athletic. You know what it is? It's tennis meets ping pong.
For 85-year-olds.
It's well played. I got to say, there's the silly fun, Codie. Okay, I love that.
Well, actually, you're like shin kick.
No,
But,
it's really fun. Is your style as an entrepreneur, is it ready, fire, aim, or is it different? Because I think we put too many people in that bucket,
with
and I don't think that's you.
No.
But you strike me as someone who trusts your gut. Is
Yeah.
this true, or do you tend to be more analytical?
Well, I do think we're all a byproduct of what you were raised into in entrepreneurship, and I came up in finance, and so finance is very analytical, very measured, very
Okay.
data based. I think little Codie inside is probably like a little creative, fairy floating around, feeling her gut. So some measure of the two.
Okay.
It's like I want to move fast. I do tend to have a strong bias towards things that I feel are right, one way or the other, but I really don't want you to just tell me how you feel about something. I want you to show me the data. And so on the teams, often I'll say okay, where did you come up with the data to support that decision? Or why do you think that decision is correct? And show me the evidence upon that being correct or not. And so I just think that's also healthy. One of the reasons I think we're successful at all in content is because we are data ravenous.
Yes.
I want to understand continuously what drives people to give me their attention. Attention is our most precious commodity we have. Mm-hmm. What is going to make you decide that you are going to spend time with you or with me? And the only reason that somebody is good or bad in attention is really it's data-based. It's, do we get more eyeballs? Do we hold those eyeballs for a period? Do they take action based on the things that we put out into the world? And so I tend to be a little bit analytical. And I think that's also helpful in business because it's so easy for somebody to say, I do it by my gut. Well, then what happens when your team says, my gut says this is better? Whose gut is better than the other person's gut? Now, do we just go hierarchical? Now is their drawdown to everything you do, they tell their team it's all based on gut? You kind of have to think of the second and third order effects in leadership, too.
That's right. Well, the gut comes in when we have the unknown. Data can, and that's what I was going to ask you next. What is your style and what's your recommendation when data takes you so far? So we've got data, but there's a gap between the data and certainty.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
Well, I'll often say, I think about everything in business as a scorecard. And so let's say, Ken is the number one business pickleballer, right? And you've had
I'm
more.
going to claim that.
I need to send you a show. I have ideas.
I'm very excited.
So, if you have more reps at pickleballing, if you have won more frequently, if you are the leader with a historical bias of winning, then your gut is worth more than my gut.
Exactly.
And so that is how we determine. So often our job, especially for the youth, because you know how we are when we're young, you think you know everything.
Sure.
And then as you get older, you continue to realize how little you know. And so our job constantly is to go, one of my biggest pet peeves, Ken, is actually when somebody goes, I know this is really good. I did a great job on this. Like, this is, I go, wow, that's okay. And then I'm insufferable and you don't want to work for me in that moment because I go, amazing. Okay, you know this is going to work.
Yeah.
Cool. How much we betting?
Oh boy.
Is this going to, what does no mean to you? What is your level of certainty on it? And why? Oh, because you've predicted the last 10 investments were going to go well and they all went well. Okay, strong, great, invest, bet on it. Because that's what we do in finance, right? You literally bet on the decisions that you make every day by a company that you invest in or not. And so I really like to think of that in business too, for my employees or in content. It's like, you should be so careful of the words certainty, no, incredible, good, unless you can back it up with one series of either data points externally or your own history of decision making. And I think that's a really healthy way to stay honest with yourself too.
Yeah. What do you do though? I want to stay there. Take us to a moment maybe. What is your final decision-making process where you've got some data, but there is that gap, and it's on you as the CEO or certainly as the person who's driving the organization? What do you do then?
Well, then it's who has the most skin in the game, which would be me. So ultimate decision-making goes, okay, well, Codie, I have the most to win or lose by this, which means that I get to win as to the execution. So, if somebody else wants to put more skin in the game in than I do on this decision making, then I might actually let them run with it. Okay, you feel so strongly on it, and you have a history of winning, and you're willing to put skin in the game. Okay, cool, you could do this. Otherwise, I'll say, okay, I have the most skin in the game. With the knowledge that I have, with the information at my fingertips, this is what I believe, and then this is also what I want to do. Because that's one of the beautiful parts about being in charge, is you get to go, God, the data says that, but don't care.
I love that.
I'm going to do it this way.
That's conviction.
Right.
At that point.
100%. And so as long as you sort of got to marry those two, right? I mean, at our company, we always call it qualitative, quantitative ORs. So like, I think there are scorecards in every business, right? We run most of ours by a scorecard. You have input-based scorecards. So like number of calls you make, number of emails you send. Then you have output-based, sales numbers that you have, conversions, click-through rate. You can control the inputs. You can't control the outputs. But you can maybe control the outputs more if you do more inputs, right? And so with decision making, I'll often think, well, if I don't have perfect decision, what other inputs or, metrics can I have in order for my output metrics to be better? So I might say, all right, I don't know what I'm going to do in this decision. So I'm going to have plans A, B, and C. And if A doesn't work, because I've never done this before, I have no idea what's plan B and what's plan C. And then I don't have to, because I am risk averse, actually. I do not like risk at all. Then at least I can feel like, all right, well, if I get lost, I got a flashlight, I got some water, I got a map. We can figure this out.
Well, that's mitigated risk at that point, and that you can live with.
Yeah, 100%.
Because you've weighed out what's the worst that can happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it in business, we teach people to buy businesses, right? And then we teach people to build businesses. And the number one thing I tell people is like, I want you to be so confident that your first deal will do well that you feel like there's almost a win-win solution in your first acquisition. And if you can't get there, I'd prefer you not buy the business, because if your first deal goes bad, what do you think? Buying businesses is bad. If your first deal goes good, what do you think? I can buy more businesses. And so there's actually like asymmetric risk to just your first decision in business buying that there isn't to your second or your third. Because you're like, oh, shoot, I just did a bad deal. It's not bad in and of itself to do deals.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Hey, everybody struggles from time to time, and you might have considered going to therapy, but taking the first step can feel overwhelming. Maybe it's the time commitment. Maybe you have some preconceived ideas about therapy, or maybe it's the cost. But let's get real for a minute. We'll spend money on shoes or the latest phone or even designer dog bowls. I know I like to spend money on my Michigan gear. My beloved Wolverines mean a lot to me. I probably spend too much money. But when it comes to our mental well-being, we're more likely to say we can't afford it. So listen, your mental and emotional health are important, more important than stuff. And BetterHelp makes therapy more affordable and convenient. Since it's online, you can talk with your therapist when it works for your schedule. No long commutes, no waiting rooms, and no waiting lists. Just fill out a short online survey to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if it's not the right fit, you can switch at any time for no extra cost. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/Ken to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/Ken. I had you take the Get Clear assessment, and I'm so glad you did, because I've listened to so many of your conversations in preparation for this, and I love you kind of have your own concentric circles and all that. And for those who don't know what it is, the methodology that I teach is if you use what you do best, that's the talent. To do work you really enjoy, that's passion. To produce a result that you care deeply about, that's a sense of mission. Then that is the win. You find that gig, it is not the dream job, but it is a dream job. In other words, you're spending most of your day in your zone there. So I had you take it, and influence, the missional result is what's motivating you. This is based on psychology, the 6 kind of intrinsic motivators. And so we put that in the assessment. And yours came out that your number one missional result, what drives you the most, is influence.
Interesting. God, do I have to call myself an influencer now?
No.
Is this where this goes?
But here's what's interesting. Had I had to guess, I would have said either influence or achievement.
Yeah.
I'll bet you scored high on achievement. I'll bet you it's above the line for you.
Interesting.
The way I define influence in that assessment is you love creating transformation in people.
Yeah, I do.
Where does that come from? Why do you think you're driven to influence people, whether it be a business person or a reel on Instagram or something on TikTok that meets a person? Because you're doing both. Why do you think you are driven by that? Where's that come from in your environment growing up or experience up to this point?
Well, I do think that you can materially move communities, countries, and maybe even the world as an individual. I think that we are so individually powerful, it is overwhelming and hard for us to look in the face. And that I really believe the quote that I think is falsely attributed to Maya Angelou, which is that we are not afraid of our darkness, it is our light within that scares us. And I think that's true. And so if that's true, then I think we have sort of a moral obligation to attempt to help architect the world that we think should exist. And so influence is really important to me because I think there are so many influences on us, so many influences telling us that we can't, that it's not impossible, but for you it is, that, you're not capable of it. And so we need a counterbalance to that. And so I find a unique joy in getting people to actually believe that they are more capable than they think they are. And perhaps the reason for that is I was surrounded by that as a kid. I mean, I have the most incredible family. I'm close with all of them. And all of them continuously supported this belief that I could do whatever I wanted in life, that I should try to do things that make you a good person, even and especially when nobody's watching, but that I was capable of it. And so because I was capable of, or I heard that so early, I think I've just been able to, it's like when you see The Matrix, in that movie, like the first time that he saw it, you can't unsee it.
Yes.
You can't take it back.
Yes.
And so once I kind of saw through The Matrix and I was like, wait a second, I can put my finger on the scale and materially affect the outcome of this thing that exists in the world around me. Well, I'm not that special because I know what's going on in here. So why couldn't somebody else put their finger on the scale too? And then what happens if we all put our fingers on the scale? And that I think is really uniquely powerful. And then I sort of do believe in good versus evil. Like I believe in sort of this balance of power. And I think there are a lot of evil or bad influences upon us. And increasingly, those get a lot of attention due to technology. So and you could call it clickbait or whatever. But really, I mean, we did some studies on subject lines in newsletters. And if you had a high negative subject line, that high negative subject line on average would outperform anywhere from 25 to 30% a high positive subject line. So almost ranked the exact same, except even if the story was the same and you changed nothing inside of it, if you gave it a negative frame, it did 30% better. And so I think that we sort of have to push back on that, or the world around us, increasingly, we stop trusting each other, we stop believing in ourselves, and we start labeling ourselves and others as victors versus victims.
I love that. I want to ask you about leading men. And what I also want to say, in 2025, it's very refreshing to see a very strong woman. I'm a father of a daughter, and she's just a go-getter, and she's got the strength of a Mustang. And so I love that you're a strong female, but you also, you don't seem to bandish that about as though it's like you're very strong as a female, but you're not anti-man. Am I right?
That's right. Well, it's going to be kind of ridiculous to be anti-man or woman. It's like we have both chromosomes. Like, you know,
Right.
like I got both. I got a man, I got a woman. They did this thing. It came together. They made me.
Right.
Kind of hard to come into existence without both sides of the equation. It just like rationally makes no sense to me
Right.
for people like this idea of like patriarchy and
Right.
whatever. I think that's what happens when we have too much time on our hands and we start,
Looking for something to be angry about.
something
How do you
or
lead?
identity.
But I do think you have a unique perspective, and I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
Because you how many people do you lead technically?
Oh, gosh.
You got a lot of companies.
We have a lot of companies. I really should know that. I mean, our companies have hundreds and hundreds of people, maybe close to 1,000.
Okay, great. And so you got a hierarchy. Presumably, you lead men.
Yep.
I think it'd be great for women to hear. I'd love my daughter to hear this.
Yeah.
That's primarily why I'm asking this question. What have you learned about being a strong female and leading men effectively? What's the key?
Well, I think, you know, if you want to be a good leader, you got to remember that good leaders actually only really care about their people progressing in one way or another. So like your team will love you, not if they like you, and not if you pander to them. But a good leader is really one who their people feel like they care about them and they feel like you know more about them than even they know about you. And I think it's the same with audience. Like if I go on stage and it's the Codie show and I talk all about me and what I want to do, that's kind of uninteresting for the audience. I think unless you're like if a fun thing would be like go to YouTube right now and go to like a Diary of a CEO podcast, Stephen Bartlett, and look at the top 20 podcasts that he has. And then look at the top 50. And you'll notice the top 20 and the top 50. In the top 50 are a bunch of celebrities, but they're not the top 20. Why? Because in the top 20, it's all about you, the audience. In the top 50, it's all about them, the celebrity. I did this, I did that. So if you're going to lead a man or a woman, they have to believe that you care about them and that you care more about them and you know more about them than they even do about you. Because it's not about you as the leader. And so with men in particular, I've found there are real differences, such as they need to feel respected. By and large, I've found men want to feel respected, women want to feel heard and cared for. Difference between the two. These are gross generalizations, but often true. And so as a woman, sometimes I do have to be careful to make sure that I'm not belittling a man in a way that maybe a woman wouldn't quite see it that same way. There's a difference, I think, in how you communicate to both genders. And simultaneously, I think for men, they want to feel like you don't care that you're a woman. You're not trying to power play them. You're not trying to say that they're less than. You're not trying to do the, hey, all the women are going to go do this activity and the men are going to do this activity. And they have to feel like you're worthy of leading them. I mean, most people do not want to work for somebody that they don't respect who doesn't respect them. And so I think a lot of women try to play this game of they don't earn the respect, they expect it. And that's just not the case. And, you know, you guys have hundreds of years of physiology saying that strength is what leads to leadership. And so if a woman comes on board and she's not very strong, and by strong I don't mean mean, or I don't mean, too intense or too aggressive. I just mean like certain in the belief and care about their people and have the ability to help the person become better at the end of their time with you. Then I think I've had just as much fun leading men as I have women. And in fact, I don't almost think about it at all. But I do think there are also jobs that are good for men and women. Like for instance, in content, I think for a platform like Instagram, let's say, there's a real benefit to having some women involved because it is a visual, aesthetically pleasing platform. And there's a preponderance of women on there. Whereas if you are going to run one of my painting or window cleaning companies. Well, almost all of the employees in both of those companies are men, and most of the commercial contracts they get are with men. And so let's be honest about it. That's my thought.
Yeah, I love that. That's really refreshing. A kind of derivative question on that. What are the unique advantages that a woman has in the entrepreneurial game that maybe a man doesn't have?
Well, we look different. So,
Right. Yeah.
for sure, there's just not as many of us. And so I always remember when they were like, how was it being a woman in finance? Like, I'm almost like, they're like, where did he touch you? I'm like, I really never had that experience. It was
funny.
great for me.
Right.
We had like Tom and Brad and Chad, and they all wore gray suits and looked really similar. And I got to show up in whatever I was wearing, and I had long hair and I looked different. So if nothing else, just, a bunch of blue crayons, a red crayon,
You
I
stand
stood out.
Yeah.
And so one, that's an unfair advantage. I'll take it. And two, I think, like if you can, as a woman, lean into the thing that everybody is leaning out of today, which is this, hey, let's fight on ideology and gender and whatever. And you can just say like, I don't know, that just doesn't sit right with me. I kind of think it's BS. You're rare. The other thing I think is true too is like, man, there's a lot of women these days. This is a personal pet peeve, but like women run companies that are like pink everything and bedazzled and, curly Q
Yes.
cursive.
Yes.
It's like, why? Why do we have to play like that game? Why can't I just say I'm a CEO? I don't have to mention what kind of anatomy I got going on prior to that. And so I think those are real unfair advantages. One, you look different than most CEOs because there aren't that many of us. And then two, you get to say like, I don't care about point one. And so let's just like go and create the best products and serve more clients than anybody else. And if we can do this, then we will prove that more female CEOs is cool.
Yeah.
And then, we can do it all together. And I think what'll happen in the next, it's already starting to happen, but, men have, there's a massive movement in the U.S. right now, I think, around male loneliness. I think there's a huge movement in the U.S. about unemployment. I mean, Nicholas Eberstadt is an incredible researcher, if you know Nick, all about the work epidemic in working age, able-bodied men.
7 million of them, he has said.
That's right. So, and they feel so isolated and non-purpose filled that they have opted out of the workforce. And I think we need to get those people back to work. And so I actually think there'll be like two next epidemics or two next movements. And one will be we need to get men working again and back into the fray and believing that men are really important and purposeful and strong men are incredible. And you guys should never have to apologize for your race or your gender. That's ridiculous. And then simultaneously, I think we have an epidemic, and we talked about this a little bit beforehand, of women who were told to girl boss and doesn't matter, you don't need no man, and you can wait to get pregnant, until whenever you want. And that's not true. And so I think the next epidemic will be women kind of asking themselves, was it worth it? Did I wait too long? It is hard to get pregnant, and it's harder than I thought it was going to be. And it's okay if I want to stay home with kids, just like it was okay if I went to work. It's all okay.
Right.
So I hope we come back around to sanity in both of those things.
Yeah, I think you're right. Thoughts on those men? If you were going to get in a boardroom with a bunch of whiteboards and sticky notes and say, all right, let's get these men back to work. Mm-hmm. I love that you're in the trades. You're a proponent of the trades, the businesses that you own. I mean, you call them boring businesses. Yeah. I think these men this is based on Nicholas's research. Mm-hmm. But I want you to weigh in here. We've both read it. We're familiar with it, obviously. I think that they think life cannot get any better. Mm-hmm. I think they feel they've missed out on the dream. And the boat has taken off. Mm-hmm. And I have said this a million times to leaders. People don't want a better job in 2025. They want a better life. They'll work at a boring business for a female leader or whatever, if they feel like they have a path to what prosperity means to them, prosperity being very objective. Is that true? Do you disagree? I don't mind if you push back on that.
No, I think you're exactly right. A lot of people in our companies will say that the hardest thing they have to deal with right now is they can't hire. It's too hard to find good labor.
Yeah, and yet we got 7 million men in basements.
And and if you listen and you were at a conference and we were listening to a bunch of people on a stage in the trades, they would say, well, you need to pay them a little bit more. Here's how you go to this location. You get them from that. You steal from competitors. A lot of tactics. And I actually think it's the total opposite of that. It's that I think that your job is to sell your employees on the fact that their dream is bigger on top of your pedestal. that you are not there.
That.
Yeah, you're not there to take over their dream. You're there to lift their dream up.
Yes.
That's your job
Yes.
as the CEO, is for them to say, whoa, if I come to work for Ken, my dream just got so much bigger, the life that I could have.
Agreed.
And to really make them see that. And so I think in the trades, the reason why there's no loyalty, the reason why there's massive churn, the reason why you can't find people is because you treat them like a number, not an actual team member, as you guys would say here. You treat them as something disposable. They don't have a seat at the table. There's not clear incentive alignment. You don't have a clear mission, visions, and values. And if you do have them, you don't live them. And, especially people in the trades, they can sniff that out so fast. Like, there is nobody who is harder to BS than like a coal miner. I mean, I've met them. I try to do my song and dance. And they just no reaction, look at you. Like, it's no.
Yeah.
And it's the same with like my guys who run big trucks.
Right.
Like, they just can't be BS'd.
Right.
But like, very few people have believed in them. So if you can be the person that goes, hey man, you do these couple of things, and don't get me wrong, it doesn't work for everybody. There are many people that are lost to drugs, to poor habits, to varying types of vices and addiction, and to the biggest vice and addiction of all time, which is, I want the lazy way out, and not realizing that that is actually, of course, one of the 7 original sins, but also a path to misery.
Yeah.
So there are those for sure.
Yeah.
But I think there's way more who just have never had somebody go, hey man, you're super valuable. If you did more of this and less of that, you'd make way more money, and we could use a leader like you here.
Right. And I'm going to give you what you need.
Yeah.
Because that coal miner's looking at you going, I just need a helmet with a light that works.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, give them the tools they need to do their job and honor them.
100%. Yeah, and get out of my way.
Get out of their way.
Out of my way.
That's
Which
so
is half
good.
the job of a leader,
Yeah,
right?
it really is.
It's like, find the people who are mission aligned and competent, and then get out of their way.
I love that. So good. All right, we have a question right here.
Codie, this is more of a personal question. I have to get vulnerable to kind of speak about it. I'm an adventure seeker, kind of a little bit of, I want freedom above everything. So super important. I've jumped a lot through things in life. Like, I did my engineering degree, figured out, be like, okay, I'll figure that out next thing. So did my pilot's license, and then yacht master, and then built a company, sold it, and then built a yacht and sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. But it's always jumping from thing to thing to find that next, like, what's the next big thing? And then I'm generally good at seeing patterns in things. So someone can tell me on a dream quickly, but then after 6-7 months, I start seeing, okay, there's a lot of red flags. I see the patterns. I don't see my vision to building something big, and I move to the next company. What kind of advice or maybe selection that you can see where I'm making a mistake on that?
What are you unhappy about in the path that you're already on right now? It sounds like you've done some cool stuff. Are you unhappy with how much money that you've made and how big of a company you've built? Or are you unhappy because you don't like what you do every day?
Yeah, I mean, one is definitely, I don't like what I do, but like, so at the moment now, since we immigrated to the United States, I had to join someone. I'm working for him, building his dream. But I feel like, first, one, the vision's not there to build something big enough. It just feels like, okay, we're building something, we're creating cash flow, but what are we really changing?
Okay.
Like, are we really changing people's life? Is there something, a meaningful thing that we're building? And then the number 2 is the freedom. Like, I hate taking orders. It's a hard one.
A lot there.
Yeah.
Plus the ADHD and all the other stuff
Yeah.
that comes with it.
I saw a little bit of
That's
that
been-
with your question you asked there. So I think, couple things. One,
Yeah.
have you already taken his assessment?
I haven't.
Okay.
I wrote.
So
That's part of the problem.
yeah, I think that, Oracle of Delphi famously said, if I could tell you one secret, it would be know thyself. And so I think first you got to start with, who are you? What do I actually want? What does success and good look like for me? And it goes back to kind of that idea of like, if you don't have a destination, it doesn't matter if you've got the headlights or the GPS, you don't know where you're going. And so taking some time to sort of soul search, what does good look like for me? Because if somebody unrelated to you heard your life story, it's like, yeah, the yachts and the pilots, and then I traveled. It sounds cool, but maybe it wasn't exactly what you wanted. And so why? You're chasing the proverbial Alice's rabbit down a hole, but you don't actually know if you want to end up in Wonderland or not. And so the first thing I'd say is like, know thyself, do a deep dive. The second thing that I think is really helpful for that is maybe take the thing that you found out and go run it by some trusted people who are going to tell you the things you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Can you take the real feedback on you? And that one is always painful. It's painful for me too, but hear it. And then the third thing is once you know yourself and what you want, a little tough, but I would stop asking yourself, what do you want? And I would start asking yourself, what are you willing to do to get it? And if you start with sacrifices as opposed to goals, then you will be more realistic about what it takes. And that would be my 30 seconds, I don't know you very well, but gut reaction to your question. And thanks for sharing it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I we got to stay here. The coach in me is flaring right now. I think you have some conflict, is my guess. And the conflict is, one of it's pure. One of the conflicts, there's two voices, I think, that you're having a wrestling match. And I call it the head and the heart. So there's the head voice and the heart voice. Is that resonating
100%.
with you? And here's what I would say on that. You got to get them aligned. And the starter in you, I think, is the heart voice. Your heart longs for something, and your head voice keeps talking you out of it. And I see a head shake over here, and I know from meeting you earlier, you guys are together, and she's a therapist. So there's a lot here, and I'm trying to be succinct here.
Yeah.
I think that you've got to start listening to your heart. But the alignment of, if I use what I do best, there's just some natural talent you have that ought to tell you where you ought to be in the world of work. It's just that simple. If you suck at it, you shouldn't be doing it. This idea that, Codie, it drives me crazy on social media. You can do anything you want if you try. No, you can't. Because I know this, because I played sports as a kid.
Pickleball.
Well, that I'm pretty decent at. But basketball is my favorite sport. You see me, I'm 5'8", all right? And I can barely jump over this piece of paper if I put it on the floor. Guess what? If I practice forever to dunk the ball, I will never be able to dunk the ball. Why? I don't have the physical talent to jump. I think you've got to get really clear on, this is what I'm good at. And so that will allow us to then move into the heart. And the heart longs to do this. Well, can I do it, Codie?
Yeah.
And if I can do this thing that I long to do, now we've got evidence.
Yeah.
And what's going to stop happening is these distractions and the head voices come in, and now he's looking at, see, we got something. And the head voice is going, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be because this ghost. And something's going on, and I really, really recommend your therapist wife get you with another therapist, because I think you're chasing a ghost. And I think every time you jump from these things, there's a ghost that tells you got to jump because the thing that you've locked into is not good enough. It's not worthy enough. Codie's right. Knowing thyself is huge, Codie. It's clarity.
Yeah.
Clarity gives us confidence
Yep.
to stay the course. Because you talked about self-doubt earlier. At some point, though, you had some real clarity. Remember, you talked about that second time? You go, that second time my dad said I finally had the cojones.
Yeah.
At some point, you got enough clarity that you were confident enough to go all the way. Is that true?
Yeah, it's very true. But I think we have to give ourselves a little credit, and you do too, that like humans are mimetic desire machines.
Yes.
Like everything we want, we only know how to want it because of comparison. It's actually fascinating. We're one of the only animals that's like that. And so one of my favorite bosses said, nothing is good or bad except by comparison, which is true. And so I think you should give yourself some credit that like we have to take back our programming, that you're exactly as successful as you programmed yourself to be, that programming is because we're in a petri dish of other people's things, which leach into what we are. And so at some point you have to take a step back and go, God, I'm confused. And that's okay.
Yes.
Because I saw Tom, Dick, and Larry had this thing, and I'm not exactly sure if I want it because they have it or if I want it because I want it. And so
That's good right there. That's that moment where you
Yeah.
go from confusion back to clarity.
Yeah.
Go back a few steps.
Yeah.
I love that. It's really good.
Well, it's hard to do.
It's very hard.
and it's hard to slow in this world, and it's
Yeah.
hard to stop
Yeah.
consuming and take a moment to actually
And
create.
thank you for your vulnerability.
Hey, thank you both. for
Been
your
there,
feedback.
pal. I love that right there. That's why we do this show. So good. All right, another question here.
Okay, my question for you, Codie, is what's a personal insecurity that you've had to overcome as you've grown your business and as your brand has developed?
Ooh, I love this.
Yeah, you know what? I was just thinking about this yesterday. When you first start out in a business, I think that is it's the best because nobody expects anything of you. You're actually expected to fail. Like when you first start out, the odds are that you will fail. And so it's awesome. Because if you fail, you're like, yeah, well, that's what happens to everybody.
Right.
You just think Silicon Valley, you realize that everybody fails there. It's totally normal. The insecurity that is scary for me today is now I talk about this stuff on the internet like I know what I'm talking about. So even though we've had all the success and you have companies that do hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, what if you mess up now, after you're successful, after you've gotten to the next level of the game? And so that is something that I think about because when I was younger Codie, I thought that at a certain point you would hit this level of money or this level of success, and you'd be like, I'm so good. Anxiety gone, insecurity gone. It's actually not the case. I think you continue to have bigger and bigger problems that you have to solve, the bigger that you get, and it gets harder in a lot of ways. Now, don't get me wrong, like money actually makes life easier. So like that is true. So chase your first 500K. Don't let anybody tell you differently. After 500K, life gets a lot better, 500K a year. But I think that insecurity of no matter where you are always going to worry about, am I capable of the next level? Is this too big for me? Can I handle that? That's always been mine. And I think I'll always hold some portion of it. And I just have to be able to turn that into fuel as opposed to like fodder for that voice in my head.
Is it a function, I love that answer, is that a function of the more you take on, the more you're going to have that voice in your head? Because the stakes are higher now.
I think so. Yeah. And I think it's just good for all of us to remember that like, no matter where you are in your journey, you're going to still have that insecurity. And so it goes back to that expectation setting. If you remember that, then you don't have to be worried about those nights where your head in the hands, no idea of what to do next, because you'll realize somebody else is there right now. And, I saw this, I think her name's, I'm going to misquote. She's a doctor. She's on the internet. And she had this like jar of rice. And in the jar, there's like 1/4 of the rice were brown rice and the rest of the rice were white rice. And she said at any given moment, 1 out of 4 people in the world is having some sort of mental health issue. Like they're crippling anxiety, they're going through depression, they're suffering from, PTSD or whatever the case may be at any given point. And she's like, so sometimes you think, well, all of these white rice they're fine. Everybody's doing good. But she's like, when you shake the jar, you realize that we're all in there together and that nobody stays in their state forever. And so at some point you will be the one who maybe you had a baby and so you're dealing with postpartum. And that'll be a cycle of life. Maybe you just exited a company and you have no idea what to do next. You're totally purposeless. Maybe you just lost your job. And so you think that you're not valuable and nobody will ever value you. Or maybe you're stuck in a job you hate and you have no idea how to get out of it. And at any given point, we are all struggling with some version of this, which just means that your mental state is just like spring, fall, summer, winter. You're just going through a season. And at some point, probably every couple of years, we're all going to have a season we don't like. And that's what keeps me sane in the moments where young Codie might have been crippled by the things in front of me.
So good. I want to talk about something I think you're on the forefront of. You've talked a lot about it on social media, and you've got a lot of great thoughts. And I think it absolutely may be one of the biggest economic factors in the next 10 years. And I may be wrong on the 10 years, but I'm going to take a quote from you. 75 million baby boomers will retire by 2030. Boomers own about 2/3 of all businesses. That is a mind-blowing piece of data if you just soak on that for a minute.
Yeah.
Their kids want to be influencers, not take over a plumbing company. Here lies our opportunity. This is a statement, Codie, and I love a big, bold statement, so I want to give you a chance to unpack this. This is a $10 trillion opportunity. I don't think that was hyperbole, knowing what I know about you now. If we don't solve for this, what happens? Let's start macro, then we'll get micro. What if we, as Americans, don't step into these open businesses, for lack of a better phrase?
Yeah, then we live in a perpetual Walmart, Starbucks, Costco, and I don't think any of us want that.
No.
I think if we don't take over these small businesses, we continue to have the few own everything and we have to ask for permission, and we don't want that. If we don't take over these small businesses, then in 2020, private equity owned 4%. No, in 2000, private equity owned 4% of our businesses. By 2020, they owned 20% of our businesses. if we don't start buying, taking over, transitioning these businesses, I think we have a recession the likes of which will make 99, 2000, 2008 look cute, because we don't realize that 50% of jobs are held at small businesses.
That's right.
That there are many communities throughout this country where they cannot function because they're missing core infrastructure of small businesses. If you think about it at scale, what does private equity do? Private equity continues to look for efficiencies in the market. They continue to strip down and centralize tasks and services, and they don't look to do things that are unscalable, like, let's say, providing services to a very rural location where they only have a small amount of clients, the likes of which could be a great personal job, but would be a terrible business. And so I think we actually have an existential threat on our hands to the U.S. That's why I try to not talk in hyperbole. And if you're like, well, that's kind of just your gut, Codie, I would say, well, it doesn't take that far to look over to Japan. And we actually, there's data, you can see it firsthand, that businesses all around Japan are shuttering. And they are shuttering. They are profitable, long-standing businesses that nobody wants. They cannot give businesses away in Japan. And if you think about how long it takes to make a business profitable, that 90% of businesses fail, that most businesses that exist only make $40,000 a year for the entrepreneur, and you have businesses that are profitable that are closing because of the age dynamics in Japan. And so I think that we are very quickly becoming a nation of people who are opting out of the workforce. We're becoming a nation of people that are quiet quitting and not doing as much. And we are becoming a nation of people who want titles that sound cool as opposed to impact that is real.
Yeah, it's good right there. That'll preach, Codie.
Right? And
I
so
mean,
that's what I worry about and keeps me up at night.
I want to ask you about something you said. I love this quote because it really challenged me. So I want to get more context. You said, you don't need more friends, you need allies. You're already smiling. Have you caught some flack on this one?
Of course.
Most
on
friends,
the internet, no.
Yeah, right. Most friends tell you it's okay. Slow down. We miss you. Allies tell you, keep going. You got this. You didn't sign up for small. And as I said, when I read it, again, I didn't just immediately go, but I was like, I need to know more.
Yeah.
Give me the context for that.
Yeah. The best advice I ever got was actually from a monk by the name of Dandapani. And he talks about this idea of the napkin. And if you could imagine a napkin on my hand with four corners, like a napkin would, with like your mom, your best bud, your dad, another best bud.
Okay.
Success is interesting because as you become more successful than they are, what happens? You start to lift. So separation starts to happen between you and them. Separation of you make more money, separation of you have to work more to make more money. You have new friends. You have new interests. You don't want to talk about the same things anymore. You're not drinking as much, all of the things. This separation starts to happen naturally. Now, what happens at this point typically is friends or even family, they feel that separation. They love you. They love the old you that you were. That's what made them love you. When they start to see the separation happens, fear kicks in, change creates anxiety, and they're worried you're going to continue to pull away. But what happens with success that's so great is that as you lift, there's a point right about here where they all start to lift. And so you have this ability to lift your friends and family along with you, but they won't see it at first. And so what I've found with most people is right when you are struggling the most to break free, to create something big, to move forward, your friends turn into the people that want to pull you back. Not because they're crabs in a bucket and they don't want you to escape, but because they love you and you leaving them is scary for them.
That's right.
And whether or not they're ever able to get through that and support you is really their battle. But you realizing that especially at those precious moments where you're uncertain and you are not full of clarity, you need to surround yourself with people that say, hey, keep going. You got this. No problem. I'm excited to see you up here. I know that you're going there. You keep going. And I think what happens to a lot of us is then we have two camps, right? You either go, if they're negative or they, give you feedback or whatever, you bail on them. You don't need those people. Don't be around anybody who's less successful than you. I'm not sure that's the right answer. But the other right answer is not stay with everybody all the time that you've been friends with forever. Allow them to talk about it however that you want.
Yeah,
they
I
want
agree
to.
with that.
And so that is what I mean. I think most of us do not choose friends based on those who push us to be better.
Right, I agree. So when you said ally, so I totally agree with you. Could not agree more. Is an ally essentially that acquaintance?
Could be. It could, or
and
it
why
could,
not get new friends? I'm going to go there. I'll go there.
yeah.
I actually have said this publicly. I'll say it now. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you disown those people
Sure.
in the napkin.
Yeah.
Because what I loved about what you said is you nailed it. It's also family too.
Oh, yeah.
They feel like you're leaving them behind.
Nope.
I'm not suggesting that we disown those friends or family, but I would suggest that you need to spend more time with some new friends. Go deeper than allies.
Yeah.
Push back if you disagree, because I was curious about your use of the word ally there. Is that acquaintance who I'm not necessarily doing life with them? They're not like a true friend, but I'm spending enough time with them to where they are doing, in fact, what you said in the quote. Come on, keep going. The water's nice here. Come on in.
Yeah, I think it's less about how close to them you are, and more about me, it's what is their attitude towards your success. So, I consider many of my friends I have some dear friends that I love in Austin, Texas, who are also kind of successful, but every time I see them, they're like, we miss you. Where have you been? I love those friends. We're still close, but that's not an ally. An ally is some of my friends who I might have known them forever, but they're like, my God, I saw the book. This is amazing. I know we can't talk. You no need to respond. You keep going. And they send me a nice little text.
Okay, gotcha.
And so I actually don't think it's proximity. It's just attitude.
Gotcha.
And then you can label your friends and you can say to your point, God, I don't have any allies in my friends. So now I do need some new friends.
Love that. Okay, I see it. So it's not friends or not friends. It's just the type of friend they are.
Yeah. What's their attitude towards your success? If their attitude towards your success is keep going, whoa, what did you learn? How can I support? You came out with a new product. I want to buy it. Don't give me a discount. I'm buying it straight up. Right. That's an ally.
Well, I got to say, I was so looking forward to our conversation, and
Same.
because of your honesty, and I think it's so great. Folks, I put these conversations together because I want to take away something. And if I'm learning something, I hope that you're learning something. I know our audience that's in the room is learning something. Here's my takeaway. And it was a real fresh reminder that even though I'm middle-aged now, it's hard to admit that, been able to be successful and do the things that I set out for, there's still a lot left in the tank. And the thing I'm taking away to challenge myself is to be around people in the next week to 10 days, new people, or some people that I haven't spent enough time with, that their Tuesday is a dream day for me. That really stuck with me. That's a great way of saying it. I think that's a challenge to all of us in multiple areas of our life, our professional life, our physical life, our relational life, our financial life. You get the drill here. So who are some people that their Tuesday is a dream day for you in an area of your life where it's not where you want it to be? I think that is a phenomenal lesson. I'm going to take that away. So if you enjoyed this conversation, I'd love for you to let us know by liking and subscribing. Also, if you'd like to join us here in studio for a future live recording, check out the link in the show notes for up-to-date info on guests, dates, and opportunities. Well, friends in the room, I know you enjoyed Codie as much as I did. Would you join me in thanking her for hanging out with us? That was so great.